Go for the pulls and the pools. Go for the oohs and the ahs. Go for the bubbles and the bubbly. Go for the story and the stories. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
What's up, everybody, and welcome in to the Legal Hands to the Face show on this depressing Tuesday afternoon in Philadelphia. The Philadelphia Eagles season is officially over, and the Eagles lose in embarrassing fashion to the Tampa Bay Bucs in that Wildcard matchup. Welcome in, guys. My name's Bill Colarulo. This is the Legal Hands to the Face show. Usually we're coming to you Monday nights, but because we had a Monday night game, it's Tuesday. And this season is over, and it ended a lot earlier than a lot of us anticipated that it would. Some of us knew this was going to happen after what we saw the last couple of weeks, but nobody saw this coming when the season started. And it has been only 337 days. 337 days since Super Bowl 57, when the Philadelphia Eagles were one half away, up 10 points from winning a Super Bowl. And it feels like that was 337 years ago. Because now we sit here with the Eagles getting dominated in a wild card game against an inferior opponent, at least on paper. And there are so many questions now surrounding this team. Coaching questions, personnel questions, leadership questions, that I don't know when this team is getting back to a Super Bowl again. But we're going to talk about it all, guys. We are live here on the Legal Hands to the Face YouTube channel. We are live on Instagram. We are live on TikTok, Facebook. We are everywhere. And if you're listening to the audio, we will take the audio, upload this to all your favorite podcast platforms. So be sure to leave us a review if you can. Really helps us reach more Eagles fans. And just because the season is over does not mean that the Legal Hands of the Face show is over. We're going to be coming to you all offseason. Because unlike last year, where all the vibes were good all offseason, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. And we're going to talk about it all today. I want to talk about that game yesterday. I want to talk about this coaching staff. I want to talk about this personnel. So I'll be coming to you for the next hour right here on the Legal Hands to the Face show. So thanks for tuning in. So let's start with this game yesterday. Because I cannot remember in all of my time being a Philadelphia sports fan, and I'm going to even take this further than just Philadelphia Eagles. I'm talking all Philadelphia sports. I cannot remember watching a Philadelphia sports team completely check out on their coaching staff in a playoff game. Completely check out on a season when they were still in the playoffs. You saw them check out last week against the Giants, and you saw them check out in that wild card matchup against the Tampa Bay Bucs. I've never seen anything like that before. And for me, that is an indictment of this coaching staff. I'm not absolving the players. We will get there. But their lack of effort yesterday, their lack of desire yesterday, their lack of want to in tackling, in blocking, in executing. That was a team that has given up and checked out on their coaching staff. And that's why, as we sit here today, not even 1 year removed from Super Bowl 57, we have to have a really serious conversation about whether or not Nick Sirianni should still be the head coach of this football team. And we'll talk about it later in the show. But I saw a team that checked out. I saw a team that had no desire to tackle. And if you guys tune in to the JAKIB Sports game day shows, Seth Joyner, me, Mark Farzetta, Mike Missinelli, Seth Joyner talks a lot about how tackling is a desire. Tackling is a want-to. It is a mindset. This team wanted no parts of it. Now, I think the defense lacks personnel, and we'll talk about that in a second. But it doesn't take talent to be aggressive. It doesn't take talent to have desire and at least give 100% effort. The lack of effort had nothing to do with talent yesterday. It had to do with a team that didn't believe anymore. A team that gave up on their coaching staff. Now, as bad as it was, and as bad as the effort was in a 32-9 loss against the Tampa Bay Bucs, who aren't a good team, by the way. It's just that the Philadelphia Eagles are even worse right now. The Philadelphia Eagles may be, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this, right now may be the worst team in the NFL. Is there any team in the NFL that if the Philadelphia Eagles had to play this weekend, if they were still in it, and you could go and handpick your opponent, and you could say, we want that team that the Philadelphia Eagles could beat right now? Because I can't think of one. You would have said maybe the Giants? No. Maybe the Cardinals? No. The Carolina Panthers? Who knows? The Bucs only put 9 points up on them last week. So when I talk about a lack of effort, that's on the players checking out of their coaches. But I'm also not going to forgive the lack of talent on the defensive side of the football. And for me, that's on Howie Roseman. We want to give Howie Roseman all the credit in the world. I'm guilty of it too. I give him all the credit in the world when he makes smart decisions, when he makes good decisions, trades, free agent acquisitions. But this defense that has stunk since week one, make no mistake, I know we want to blame Matt Patricia, and Matt Patricia didn't do a great job when he took over for Sean Desai. And we'll talk about that move in a second, another ridiculous move that I think came from Howie Roseman. But we want to talk about this defense. It wasn't just Matt Patricia. It wasn't just Sean Desai. It wasn't just a handful of games. This defense has stunk since week one. They let Mac Jones throw for 300 yards 19 weeks ago. They've stunk all season long. And that is on Howie Roseman. Look at this defense and look at the personnel that Howie Roseman rolled out on what was supposed to be a Super Bowl contending defense. And it's embarrassing. And this isn't hindsight being 2020. We're not looking back now and saying, oh, well, no one expected that. We expected it. Every single one of us complained about the linebacker position being ignored. Every one of us complained about the safety position being ignored. And let's look at some of the decisions that Howie Roseman made going into this season. And now we sit here wondering why the defense was so terrible all year. Let's start along the defensive line. The edge rusher position. A position that we thought we had a ton of depth at. you had zero depth. There was a reason Josh Sweat hit an absolute wall. You had no depth behind him. You come into this season, you make the decision. Howie Roseman makes the decision to come into this season and bring back Derek Barnett. Derek Barnett, a guy who had more penalties in his career than he did sacks in a Philadelphia Eagles uniform. It wasn't going to happen here in Philadelphia. Now, I know Eagles cut him. He goes to Houston. He's playing great for the Texans. He never should have been brought back this year. So I know people want to debate whether or not they should have released him and him go to Houston and compete. The mistake for me was bringing him back in the offseason. Because once you got nothing from him, once he made it known that he was disgruntled and he wanted to play more, you were forced to cut him and you got nothing. So now you're left with Josh Sweat, Hassan Reddick, and really no depth behind him. You got Brandon Graham, who just can't play the same amount of reps that he even played last season. When he's out there, BG's going to give it his all. BG's going to give it his all. He just can't play more than 25, 30% of the snaps. So then who else did you have? Nolan Smith, a first-round rookie that looks like he doesn't have it. I'm not ready to call him a bust. It's only 1 year. He may grow into it. You give him some time. But Howie Roseman decided to come into this season with really no depth at the edge rusher position and then compounded that mistake by releasing Derek Barnett and having no backup plan. And that's probably, when you look, the strongest position we had on the team was our D-line. But let's go right behind them to the linebacker position and what Howie Roseman decided to do this year. Let Kazir White walk. Let TJ Edwards walk. Decided to go into this season putting everything on the Kobe Dean's shoulders, a guy who played 34 career snaps before this season. And again, this isn't hindsight being 2020. I was doing videos all freaking summer, about how you cannot go into this season putting all of your hopes and dreams on the defense on the Kobe Dean's shoulders. We didn't know if this guy was going to be able to play at the NFL level. We were hopeful, but you had no backup plan. And the moment Nakobe Dean went down, what could you do? You brought in Nicholas Morrow, who the Chicago Bears said he started for us last year. He led our team in tackles last year, but guess what? We're going to upgrade to your starter from last year. They jumped at the opportunity to get TJ Edwards and replace Nick Morrow. But the Eagles, who are supposed to have Super Bowl aspirations, took a player the Bears didn't want. Then when they realized Dean wasn't the answer and Morrow wasn't the answer, they had to go get another linebacker that nobody else wanted in Zach Cunningham, who was still available 2 weeks into training camp. They got real desperate. They also brought in Miles Jack, who ended up retiring a week after they brought him in. Things were still bad. So then they had to get even more desperate and go and get a player that the Indianapolis Colts said, you know what? We're not even going to trade Shaq Leonard. We're not even going to save any money on the contract we owe him. We're just going to cut him. That's what we think of Shaq Leonard. Eagles took him too. So now a team with Super Bowl aspirations has linebackers that nobody else in the league wanted. And it gets worse. So that's what they do with the D-line position. That's what they do with the linebacker position. Now let's go to the safety position. They let Marcus Epps and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson walk, both your starters from last year. I was okay giving the one job to Reed Blankenship. But what the hell were you doing at the other safety position? Howie Roseman decided they were going to go into this year, and you talk about guys nobody else wanted. They tried to fill the other starting safety position with Terrell Edmonds, who Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh said, hey, Terrell Edmonds started for us. He was on our team for 5 years. Sure, sign him to a cheap one-year deal. You really think Mike Tomlin would have let Terrell Edmonds out the door on a cheap one-year deal if the guy could play? He couldn't. Who else did they try to replace Marcus Epps and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson with? Justin Evans, a guy who's been on IR his entire career. Where was Justin Evans yesterday in the wildcard game? Oh, that's right. On IR again a few weeks ago. That's Howie Roseman. And then he got desperate again because he neglected that position. I'm all worked up. Sorry, guys. I've been going since Eagles pregame yesterday. Starting to lose my voice. I had Eagles pregame, then Eagles halftime, then Eagles postgame last night. Was on Birds 365 this morning. Then the Philly Sports Power Hour. Been talking way too many hours about this team. Frustrating. Let me get my voice back because I got a lot more to talk about. So then after they decided that Terrell Edmonds wasn't the answer, Justin Evans wasn't the answer, now he had to get desperate again, and he had to make a trade with the Tennessee Titans for a guy who's lost not only one step, 2 steps in Kevin Byard. Desperation by Howie Roseman because he neglected these positions. And I keep hearing that, let's talk about the corners, because I keep hearing, well, nobody could have expected that James Bradbury was going to take the step back that he did. And my answer to that is it's not our job to expect that. That's Howie Roseman's job. That's his scouting department and his personnel department's job. To know that when I put my money into 2 corners who are both over the age of 30 in the NFL, that there's a chance they're going to take a step back. When I go into this season, again relying on Avonte Maddox, who can't stay healthy, there's a chance he's going to get hurt. So, yeah, some things happened to this season that, okay, maybe it's not Howie Roseman's fault. That player got hurt. Oh, it's not Howie Roseman's fault. That player took a step back. It's up to him to have plans in place that just weren't there. And then desperate moves had to happen because of it. And I've talked about this before on this show. The reason why the Eagles defense was in this predicament where they're trying to fill all of these places, all of these positions with cast-offs from other teams is because they can't draft defensive players. Look, I'm going to eliminate, and we've talked about this before, I'm going to eliminate this year's draft class because I do have hopes that these guys may grow into something. But when you come into a season and you have Super Bowl aspirations like the Philadelphia Eagles had this year, you can't expect that many rookies to carry your defense. Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Eli Ricks, Keely Ringo, Sidney Brown. You can't expect all of those rookies to carry your team. Not when you have Super Bowl aspirations. Yeah, they could contribute. A couple rookies can contribute. But you can't expect that many rookies to carry your team. What you need to be able to compete in the NFL, what you need is you need young players that you drafted, that you developed, that are in their 2nd, 3rd, and 4th year contributing to your team. Because guess what? When young players are still in their 2nd, 3rd, and 4th year, most likely they're still on their rookie deal. They're still on their rookie contracts. It's how you build teams in the NFL. It's how you're able to fit more talent under a salary cap by getting young players that you drafted to contribute. And you look at that defense. Look at Howie Roseman's draft picks the last 4 years before this one. And there isn't a single draft pick outside of Milton Williams and Jordan Davis. And we can debate how good those guys are. But outside of those 2 defensive tackles, who on the defensive side of the ball did Howie Roseman draft that's still on their second, third, or fourth year deal that's contributing to this defense? Zero. Absolutely zero. And I've gone through this exercise with you guys before. We've looked at his draft picks over the years on the defensive side of the football, and this is why the defense is in the position it's in. Every single player on that defense is Howie Roseman trying to pick up in free agency, Howie Roseman trying to make a trade, Howie Roseman trying to get a guy that nobody else wanted. None of the talent on the defensive side of the football were guys that Howie Roseman drafted that should still be in their second, third, and fourth year to contribute to this defense. And to make matters worse, Howie Roseman, because God forbid he takes any responsibility, panics when they see that the defense is struggling, and they change defensive coordinators with only 4 games left in the year. They decide it would be a great idea to take Matt Patricia and have him run Sean Desai's defense with only 4 games left in the season. And there's not a doubt in my mind that that came from Howie Roseman. You heard Hassan Reddick last week when he was asked about how difficult was it to move from one coordinator to another in the middle of the season. And if you listen to his response, he said, well, the higher-ups wanted to make the change, and it's up to us as players, blah, 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 blah. I don't care what else he said. The higher-ups, not Nick Sirianni, wanted to make that change. The higher-ups wanted to make that change. And I tweeted out when they made that move, you have an offense that has all the talent in the world, that has all the personnel in the world, that looks like it's not clicking, and you make 0 changes to the coordinators. You have a defense that severely lacks personnel, and you change that coordinator. That was the end of the season for the Philadelphia Eagles, guys. The day they made that move, it was over. It was over because, number one, the defense couldn't compete. Matt Patricia wasn't the answer. And you know there are players in that locker room who support Sean Desai. Maybe not all of them, but I am sure there are players on the defensive side of the football who did not like that Sean Desai was made the scapegoat. And on the other side of the football, I guarantee you there are offensive players who looked at what happened and said, you got to be kidding me. We have 0 answers for the blitz. We have horrible play calling. We have horrible game planning on offense, and there's not going to be a single damn change. But yet you're going to strip Sean Desai of his defensive coordinator duties in the middle of the season, and we're not going to change a damn thing on the offensive side of the football? Looking back now, that was the end of this season. Right then and there. And I don't care what Nick Sirianni says. I don't care what Howie Roseman says. There is no doubt in my mind that that decision came from the top. That was Roseman and Lurie telling Nick Sirianni what he was going to do with that defense. Ridiculous. And as I started to insinuate about this offensive game plan and this offensive play calling, let's just look at yesterday. Let's look at the game against the Tampa Bay Bucs. A game where you're going up against Todd Bowles, a defensive coordinator who blitzes more than anybody in the league with the exception of the New York Giants and Minnesota Vikings. A guy who blitzes the hell out of Jalen Hurts every single time he plays him. Coming off of a week where you just went up against Wink Martindale and you had 0 answers for the blitz. 0. Did we think that Todd Bowles was going to blitz Jalen Hurts yesterday? Did we think that just maybe Todd Bowles was going to call a lot of blitzes in that game? And once again, you have 0 answers for the damn blitz? And I'm not absolving Jalen Hurts. We'll talk about him in a second because I'm not happy with Jalen Hurts either. But let's stick with the coaches for a second because this is a colossal fail across the board, guys. From Howie Roseman to the coaching staff to the players, they all failed us this season. My nose is running. I'm coughing. I'm all worked up. All worked up today. But let's take a look at the offensive game plan yesterday. You don't have A.J. Brown, your number one receiver. You have Jalen Hurts, who has a dislocated finger on his throwing hand. You're going up against a team that in week 3, you ran the ball 40 times for over 200 yards. You have a defense that can't stop anybody, that hasn't been able to stop anybody in weeks, pretty much all season. We said it all week. Establish the run early. Lean on the strength of this football team, its offensive line. Win the time of possession battle. Keep your weak defense on the sidelines. And what do the Philadelphia Eagles do in that game? I was actually making jokes last week leading up to the game because I thought there was no chance that they would do this, making jokes that all those things I just mentioned about no A.J. Brown, dislocated finger on Jalen Hurts' throwing hand, a team you ran for 200 yards against, a team that you need to win the time of possession battle. I was making jokes saying, oh, watch, the Eagles will come out and throw the ball 40 times. And they actually did. You look at the first half, they ran 26 plays in the first half. They threw the ball 21 times. They gave DeAndre Swift 4 carries in the entire first half. And 2 of them were on back-to-back plays to start the game. You watch this offense and you watch the play calling. It's the most frustrating and helpless feeling sitting there, watching this coaching staff fail game after game after game. You look at the first 2 plays of the game, DeAndre Swift is picking up chunks. Then they get into a 3rd and 2 after you've just ran the ball successfully on 2 straight plays. And Nick Sirianni and Brian Johnson decide, you know what? We just ran the ball really well. We're picking up 4 yards a clip. It's 3rd and 2. Let's come out in an empty set. So now the defense doesn't even have to worry about the run. Smart. Really, really smart. And of course, they don't pick it up. And of course, every damn time Jalen Hurts dropped back, he was being blitzed. And of course, there was 0 answers for it. I saw a stat from Next Gen Stats after the game. Tampa Bay had 10 unblocked pressures. 10 unblocked pressures on Jalen Hurts. That tied for the most of any defense the entire season. If this was a shock, if Todd Bowles is a guy who never blitzed and they came out and started blitzing the hell out of Jalen Hurts and the Eagles weren't ready for it, I'd be frustrated, but at least you could say, okay, they just didn't know it was coming. What a game plan by Todd Bowles. Who expected this? This is a guy who every single time he's played Jalen Hurts has blitzed him over 75% of the time. Completely, as Seth Joyner likes to say, coaching malfeasance by Nick Sirianni and Brian Johnson. Do you know what the Philadelphia Eagles' 3rd down conversion rate was yesterday? 0 for 9. They converted 0% of their 3rd down opportunities yesterday. 0% in a playoff game. Unfreaking believable, man. An absolute disgrace what I saw on the offensive side of the football. And I'm not absolving Jalen Hurts. I think the coaching staff needs to be better. I think the game planning needs to be better. The play calling needs to be better. But Jalen Hurts needs to be better too. Now, I think a lot of that does flow from the coaching staff, but Jalen, you can't take that safety in the second half, man. You're not a rookie quarterback. That's a rookie quarterback mistake. Eagles didn't snap that ball from their 2-yard line. They didn't snap that ball from their 5-yard line. Jalen Hurts snapped that ball at the 14-yard line. There is no way in hell you should take a safety when you're snapping the ball from your own 14. And then you just look at the body language of this team. It looks like Jalen Hurts doesn't care. It looks like Jalen Hurts doesn't have relationships with his teammates. Now, whether or not any of that is true, you don't know. But from the outside looking in, this looks like there are more issues than even what we're seeing on the field. And I have a really strong feeling that over the next few days, you're going to start to hear some things coming out of that locker room. And I'm petrified about what we may hear. Because like I said, guys, only 337 days ago, they were 30 minutes away from winning a Super Bowl. And when that game ended and they lost, all of us took solace in the fact that, okay, they got a young franchise quarterback. They have one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. They got a young offensive head coach who's going to have us competing every single year. There's a lot of talent on this roster. And now we sit here, less than a year later. Do we have a good head coach? Do we have a franchise quarterback? Do we have a young, talented roster? It is not a good day for me, man. It is not a good day for me. It's not a good day for Philadelphia Eagles fans. And we're going to take a quick break, guys. When we come back, I want to take a look at more about this personnel and what this leadership group, Howie Roseman, Jeffrey Lurie, what they should do with Nick Sirianni and this coaching staff. So hit that like button for me, guys. Hit that share button. We'll be right back.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
At Pond Lehocky, we've recovered billions of dollars for our clients, and we're confident we can do the same for you. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured clients obtain some of the largest settlements in Pennsylvania. One conversation is all it takes to help you and your family get back on track. If you've been injured in an accident, give Pond Lehocky a call.
They're carving them up and good play calling along the way. First and goal at the 6.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy has a way for you to play alongside your favorite football team all season long with their fantasy pick'em game. You pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, Then do what you usually do on a Sunday. Watch the games. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, and the Sports Betting Show wants you to get involved. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. When you sign up, use the promo code WIN, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News?
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back into the Legal Hands to the Face show with Bill Colarulo. Sorry, guys. I am just not feeling good today. I mean, I know you feel exactly the same way I do, but I'm on a little bit of a rant here. I mean, I've been going since yesterday. Started with the post-game show, and then all morning been on some other shows talking, and it's just, the more I talk about it, the angrier I get. Because there is just no excuse for what we saw the last 7 games of this Philadelphia Eagles season. And we were talking about the offense before we went to break. We were talking about Jalen Hurts and how I'm not absolving him, talking about how bad this offensive coaching staff is. And I just want to look at some of these numbers from the defense again, because you just let the Tampa Bay Bucs, who had the 23rd ranked offense in the NFL this year, put up over 400 yards against you. 400 yards. That's now the 3rd week in a row that you've let an opponent put up over 400 yards. And you're not talking about good offenses. The 23rd ranked Bucs, the 30th ranked New York Giants put up over 400 against you. The Arizona Cardinals put up over 400 against you. And this Philadelphia Eagles defense, as bad as they've been all season long, the one thing they could do well to start the year was stop the run. Number 1 in the league through the first 9 games. Teams were only averaging 66 yards against. They held the Tampa Bay Bucs to only 41 yards rushing in week 3. They've now let every single one of their last 9 opponents rush for over 100 yards. Absolute disaster on the defensive side of the football. And the frustrating thing for me is when we look at this roster, that defense has a lot of work to do. This isn't a magic fix. I wish it was going to be an easy thing to say, oh, we'll just make a change here, we'll make a change there. There are a lot of question marks on that defense going into next season. So we'll talk about that roster in a second, but I want to look at some of these numbers because the Pro Football Focus numbers are coming out. James Bradbury yesterday was targeted 6 times, 5 catches, 108 yards, 4 first downs, a touchdown. And the only one that wasn't a completion was a drop. Goddard. James Bradbury shouldn't be on this football team. But here's the problem. And this is why in the first segment, when I'm talking about Howie Roseman, and that Howie Roseman needs to be blamed for what we're seeing, well, look at this now. Because James Bradbury shouldn't be on this football team. But you can't get rid of James Bradbury. You can't get rid of James Bradbury because of the contract that Howie Roseman gave him. Next season, if you try to move on from James Bradbury, he carries a $17 million dead cap hit. $17 million. That's on Howie Roseman. He's the one who made the decision to bring back 2 over 30 corners and ignore other positions on that defense. So now what do you do with James Bradbury. Nobody's going to trade for him. No one's going to take that contract off your hands. So now you're stuck with James Bradbury. And then Darius Slay would love to tell you how good he played, always loves to tell you how good he played. He was targeted 8 times, gave up 6 catches, 75 yards, 2 first downs. Defense was terrible yesterday. Absolutely terrible. The amount of missed tackles was the most embarrassing thing I can remember in watching a Philadelphia Eagles defense in a really long time. And I'm looking at the Pro Football Focus grades. The Philadelphia Eagles had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players who got a grade less than 50 in tackling. It's a 100-point scale, guys, if you're not familiar with Pro Football Focus. They had 7 defenders have a grade less than 50. Absolutely ridiculous. So now the big question is, before we get into the personnel, the big question is, what should the Philadelphia Eagles do with this coaching staff? Do you fire Nick Sirianni 1 year after he was in the Super Bowl? Do you fire Nick Sirianni after he gets your team to the playoffs 3 straight seasons in his first 3 years as the Eagles head coach? The first Eagles head coach in franchise history to get his team to 3 straight playoff appearances in his first 3 years. And as crazy as it sounds, and as shocking as it is for me, who was one of the biggest Nick Sirianni fans to start this season, I can't see a scenario where you bring back Nick Sirianni as your head coach. I just can't see it. Not from what we just saw. And I know people are making the argument, well, it's never been done before. A coach that went to the Super Bowl has never been fired the year after. Well, you know what else we've never seen before? An epic collapse like you just saw from this football team over the last 7 weeks. And if the Philadelphia Eagles were losing games, but they were tough games and they were hard-fought games, and it was, man, look at all the effort that team's bringing, maybe you could make that excuse. This team has given up. This team has checked out on Sirianni. And one of the things that I used to love about Nick Sirianni, or so I thought I loved about Nick Sirianni, was I thought that he was so good at building a culture that could battle adversity. I think about the things I used to say about this guy to start the season, I want to throw up. Because now when I look back, what adversity did Nick Sirianni and this football team face until they got punched in the mouth by the San Francisco 49ers? What adversity did they face? Sirianni's first season, no expectations. New starting quarterback with Jalen Hurts, rookie head coach, no expectations. They come out to a 2-5 start. And we probably should have known then, because when they came out to that 2-5 start, Nick Sirianni was calling the plays. And I remember saying that it was the worst play calling I had ever seen. He was a terrible play caller, terrible. So when they're 2-5, he decides to turn over the play calling duties to Shane Steichen. And that's when everything started to change. So that's really the closest adversity that Sirianni ever had. They start their first season as him as head coach is 2-5, and they battle back and they make a playoff. But there was no pressure on that 2-5 team. We didn't have any expectations for that team. And then you look at last year. What adversity did they face last year? Outside of Jalen Hurts getting hurt at the end of the season, what adversity did this team face? Pretty much dominated everybody. Hurts wins the last game of the season. They get home field advantage. They get the bye. They get the Giants in the first game, dominate them. They get the Niners in the NFC Championship game, dominate them. They don't even have a quarterback. There was no adversity for Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts, really, at the NFL level, until this season when they got punched in the mouth by the San Francisco 49ers. So now when I go back and think about how I used to tout Nick Sirianni for having an ability to get his team to overcome adversity, it was all BS, man. Because what adversity did this guy face? And the moment they faced real adversity, the moment the San Francisco 49ers took their soul at Lincoln Financial Field, this team cowered. This team gave up. Got dominated by the Cowboys the next week. Let the Seattle Seahawks drive 92 yards with a backup quarterback the next week. Almost blew a 17-point lead to the New York Giants the week after that. Got dominated by Jonathan Gannon and the Arizona Cardinals. Got dominated by the New York Giants in Week 18. And then just went and completely laid an egg in Tampa in the wild card. This team showed us who they were. And Nick Sirianni showed us who he is, unfortunately. And he's not the coach I thought he was. Certainly not from an X and O perspective. But the one thing that shocks me the most is how weak his culture actually was. And that's why, for me, it's shocking to say it. But I don't see a scenario where you should bring back Nick Sirianni next year. Now, whether or not I think they will bring him back is another story. If I'm Jeffrey Lurie, I'm not bringing him back. Because you're not getting rid of Jalen Hurts. And I'm sure we're going to hear some stories. I guarantee you're going to start hearing some things that there's some rift between Hurts and Sirianni. Because just look how many opportunities Jalen Hurts has had to defend his head coach. And he hasn't done it. A.J. Brown came out a couple weeks ago at his locker and talked about, I got Sirianni's back. Oh, we ride with Sirianni. Talked about how Sirianni protected them in the Seattle game, that it was him and Jalen who decided to change the play call. Right? You guys remember that. A.J. Brown talked about, that was Nick Sirianni. When Jalen Hurts was asked about that, Jalen could have easily responded, yeah, Sirianni's great. He's got our back. Love coach. How did Jalen respond? There's a lot you guys don't know. In fact, you don't know what you don't know. That was his response. Not, yeah, love coach. Yeah, coach has our back. Nope. There's a lot you guys don't know. Last night after the game, Jalen Hurts was asked about Nick Sirianni's future. Do you want Nick Sirianni back here? He didn't say, absolutely want Nick Sirianni back here. His response was, I didn't know he was going anywhere. Something is up. Because Jalen has had more than one opportunity to tell the media that Nick Sirianni should be his head coach, that he respects Nick Sirianni, and he hasn't done it. Something's going on. But now you get to the next question here. What the hell do they do if they do move on from Nick Sirianni? Because I know a lot of fans, and I see you guys in the chat. I see you on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and Facebook, and everybody's talking about, keep hearing three names over and over again. I keep hearing three head coaching names that a lot of people want. Bill Belichick, Mike Vrabel, and Jim Harbaugh. I'd take one of those guys. I actually would put Belichick number 3 on the list. Vrabel would be number 2. Jim Harbaugh would be number 1. Would love to see them bring in Harbaugh. Would love to see them bring in Vrabel. But if they do move on from Nick Sirianni, which I have a feeling they're not going to, but if they do, those coaches don't fit the Jeffrey Lurie model. They don't fit the Howie Roseman model. Jeffrey doesn't like to hire retreads, first of all. Look back to all of his coaching hires. None of them are retreads. He likes to take pride in the fact that he could find the guy that nobody else knew about. And they don't like hiring defensive coaches. So let's put Jim Harbaugh aside for a second. Let's just talk about Mike Vrabel and Bill Belichick. Look at Jeffrey Lurie's last few hires. Nick Sirianni, offensive head coach that nobody knew about. Doug Peterson, offensive head coach that nobody knew about. We only knew who he was because he played quarterback here. He was not on anybody's top list to be a head coach. Andy Reid, offensive head coach nobody knew about. And mixed in between them was Chip Kelly. Really the only time that Jeffrey Lurie went out, found the shiny object that everybody wanted, and hired him. And it didn't work out. But even Chip Kelly, offensive coach. You got to go all the way back to Ray Rhodes for Jeffrey Lurie to hire a defensive coach. And when you have over $200 million invested in your quarterback, I can't imagine that Jeffrey Lurie is going to hire a defensive head coach. Because what happens when you hire a defensive head coach is you got to go and get a good coordinator, a good offensive coordinator to work with your quarterback. But if that offensive coordinator does a good job, he's gone the next year, he becomes a head coach. So I think Jeffrey Lurie wants an offensive head coach. He wants an offensive head coach that he can pair with his $200 million quarterback so that they can grow together. That's what he thought he was getting with Nick Sirianni. So I would be shocked if Jeffrey Lurie broke the mold and went with a defensive retread in Vrabel or Belichick. So then that brings us to Jim Harbaugh. Kind of a retread. Coached the 49ers, had a lot of success. Obviously, a lot of success at the college ranks. And he's an offensive mind. Could check a lot of boxes. The problem is he doesn't fit the mold of Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman wanting a puppet head coach, a head coach that they can control, a head coach that they can tell this is who your coordinators are going to be. This is the type of offense you're going to run. This is the type of defense you're going to run. This is how we're going to use analytics in this building. You won the coin toss? You want to take the ball and be aggressive? No, that's not how we do things here in Philadelphia. The analytics tell us you kick every time. You want to establish the run? No, that's not how we do things here in Philadelphia. The analytics tell us throw the ball down the field. So as much as I would love a Jim Harbaugh's personality is way too strong for Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie because they won't be able to control him the way they control Nick and the way that they control Doug Peterson. And when Doug Peterson finally pushed back and says, whoa, I want a Super Bowl here. I want to decide who my coordinators are. What happened to Doug Peterson? Gone. So I would love Jim Harbaugh. I just don't see it happening. So as much as I think they should move on from Nick Sirianni, the problem I do have with it is if they move on from him, I don't think they're going to bring in a coach that all of us would be happy with. And what I really think is going to happen, if I had to guess, is they're going to sit down with Sirianni, and Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman are going to tell him, this is what we're doing at offensive coordinator, and this is what we're doing at defensive coordinator. And as long as Nick Sirianni goes along with it, Sirianni will be back next year. If Sirianni tries to stand up for himself, he's gone. Just like they did to Dougie P. And as much as Super Bowl 52 was the greatest day of my life as an Eagles fan, being in Minnesota, watching them win that Super Bowl is something I will never forget. I also think that that day emboldened Howie Roseman. The ego now of Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie is through the roof. You've heard Howie Roseman say it to fans. I got you your only Super Bowl. So now the arrogance is in the way. We know how to do things. We're right. Howie Roseman hit every single free agent acquisition that year. Chris Long, Nigel Bradham, Patrick Robinson, all of these one hits. Jay Ajayi. So now what he thinks, the arrogance is there where he can do that every single year. This season, no problem. I'll ignore linebacker. I'll go and find one on a one-year deal. Safety, no problem. I'll find one on a one-year deal. And they will not hire a coach that wants more power than they're willing to give. And unfortunately, we now find ourselves in the predicament that we are in because of that mentality. And once we get through the decisions about what to do with the coaching staff, there are a lot of personnel decisions now. There's a lot of things we need to figure out. Just look at the free agents coming next year. On the defensive side of the football, Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, Shaq Leonard, Zach Cunningham, Sean Bradley, Nicholas Morrow. Every one of those guys is a free agent. And maybe all of those we would say, okay, no problem. We want to move on. But you still need to replace these guys. You still have no linebacker. We still have 0 linebackers on this roster that you could rely on. And if Howie Roseman is going to do the same thing he's done every single year, he's going to try to fix that with a one-year deal for a guy that nobody else wanted. They're not going to spend money. You had a promising safety in Sidney Brown, unfortunately tears his ACL. So what's the plan now at safety? Doesn't look like it's Kevin Byard. What are you doing on the outside at corner when you got James Bradbury making all that money and Darius Slay making all that money? Oh, and guess what? Hassan Reddick's not a free agent, but he's entering the final year of his deal, a deal that he talked about at the beginning of training camp. We knew he was unhappy with. You really think Hassan Reddick wants to come back this year and play on the final year of a deal that he already thought was underpaying him? So now you got decisions to make with Hassan Reddick. And I doubt he'll be the only one that's going to be looking for a new deal. And you go to the offensive side of the football. It's being reported. Make the news even sadder today. That all-time great Jason Kelce is hanging him up. Jason Kelce is retiring. A center who's not only a Hall of Famer, who's not only one of the greatest Philadelphia Eagles players in franchise history, a center who's still playing at an all-pro level. The guy was an all-pro this year. You are not going to be able to replace him on the field, him off the field, him in that locker room. Massive loss. So now what are you going to do? I'm guessing the plan is to move Cam Jurgens over to center, and now you need a right guard. They drafted Tyler Steen this year to be that right guard, but I haven't seen enough of Tyler Steen to know whether or not he's going to be able to step in. So now one of the best offensive lines in football is a question mark going into next year. And then you look at this wide receiver core. As good as A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are, You lack a wide receiver 3. We talked about that going into the season, that Quez Watkins wasn't good enough, and he proved it again. He wasn't good enough. You need more depth at that position. And who the hell knows what's going on with A.J. Brown? I'm hopeful there's no drama, but it doesn't pass the smell test. Where there's smoke, there's fire, and something doesn't seem right. So what the hell's going to happen with A.J.? Is Devontae Smith going to want a new deal? A lot of question marks. You look at tight end. Dallas Goedert couldn't stay healthy again this year, and you have zero depth at tight end. They need a better tight end, too, on this team, without a doubt. So you have all these question marks, guys. And it's going to be a long offseason. And that's the saddest part for me today as we sit here. They were so close last year. So close. And now things just seem really far away. So the season is over, guys, but the Legal Hands to the Face show is going to keep coming every single week, all offseason. I will continue to post daily content on my Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok, on Twitter, on YouTube. So make sure you're following everywhere at Bill Colarulo, at Legal Hands to the Face. If you're listening to the audio of this on the podcast platform, it would mean a lot if you could leave a review on whatever platform you're listening to. It really helps us reach more Eagles fans. But that's going to do it for the Legal Hands to the Face show today, guys. Not a happy day. Not a happy day at all. I had Dave Spadaro, Eagles Insider, on my other show earlier this morning. I was asking him, is there any plans for Jeffrey Lurie to speak? When can we expect to hear from Jeffrey Lurie? He said last year, Jeffrey didn't speak until the owners' meetings in March. I'm praying that we hear something from Jeffrey Lurie, even if it's to tell us that Nick Sirianni's job is safe. But we need to hear something, and we need to hear something soon about what's going on with this team. Don't leave us in limbo. Don't leave these players in limbo about what's going on. But when we finish the show, guys, head on over to Instagram or TikTok. I just posted a video about the coaching search, about some of the things we talked about. Leave a comment. Send me a DM. I want to know, who would you want? If it was up to you, who would you want the Philadelphia Eagles to hire if they moved on from Nick Sirianni? And I talked about how I don't think they'll bring in a Jim Harbaugh. I don't think they'll bring in a Mike Vrabel or a Bill Belichick. A guy I'd love would be Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator from Detroit. I would like a young offensive coordinator. Top choice, Jim Harbaugh. Pipe dream, Jim Harbaugh. Not happening. But let me know, guys, on Instagram. Go over there when we're done, or TikTok. Comment under my video. Let me know how you're doing. But I appreciate you spending this hour with me, guys. I will be back every single week. I'll keep you updated. We may change the schedule a little bit. I used to come with a live show every Monday night at 6:30, but now that the season's over, we may be maneuvering some things around. So stay tuned. I'll keep you posted. But you can get daily content on all your favorite social media platforms. So make sure you're following everywhere. But I appreciate you. Hit that like button on the way out. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Go Birds.
Go for the polls and the pools. Go for the oohs and the ahs. Go for the bubbles and the bubbly. Go for the story and the stories. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.